What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Binge on the King Crusoe YouTube channel. This week is episode 44 of the series, and this week we're doing something a little bit different than I think I've done on the channel up to this point, even in a completely different way than even my normal wrap-ups are. This week on the channel, we are doing spooky season wrap up, but instead of just talking about the books that I read in spooky season, like the monthly reading wrap up and TBR already did a few weeks back, today is more like 3 mini reviews covering the limited spooky season reading that I did manage to accomplish in October. First, I'll be talking about American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. Second, I'll be talking about The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And then third, I'll be talking about Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Spooky season is not typically something that I really celebrate to any extent. Like, I'm not the crazy Halloween fanatic that a lot of people that I know seem to be, and that's perfectly fine. I think, in my opinion, there's not necessarily a problem with me deciding not to follow along with all of that hype the same way that a lot of other people do. It's just not something that my family has really done very much of. But I was still glad to be able to get a few spooky season related reads done in October since, several other people were able to read a few of these books. I think all 3 of these I had some people reading along with me all at the same time, and that was rather fun to be able to do. With that being said, let's just kind of start off doing these mini reviews since I want to be able to get through all of them without this video being too lengthy. I don't think I need to cover all these books in depth, especially this first one, talking about American Psycho. This will be a bit more brief because I do have an individual review video coming out for this book in, I think, 3 weeks' time, as of when this video releases. I really enjoyed American Psycho. Put simply, it shoots for a very specific tone and narration style that sold me on the book rather flawlessly. I think it's a very specific tone and narration style, as I've said every other time I've mentioned this book, that if it doesn't work for you, there's a good chance you will very much dislike this book. But if you enjoy that tone, even through the boring sections of the book, because yes, the book can be rather boring, to be brutally honest, if you click with the tone, you're going to love this book for one reason or another. So I really enjoyed American Psycho because it really clicked for me. It has a few truly grotesque moments and scenes amid the sort of slice of life-esque style of narration for a pompous, narcissistic jerk of a Wall Street character, and quite frankly, it's amazing. I just really enjoyed my time with this book all the way through, pretty much. My only real criticism about it is that, well, it can be boring because there's, I guess, no real plot. And what plot there is more about leaving you questioning the reality of the events of the book rather than there being like a technical conflict being resolved in the way that most plots tend to do. But that's, in my opinion, part of the joy of the package of the book. It's more about following along with this narcissistic jerk of a Wall Street character in sort of like a sort of like diary entry format in a way that was just really fun. I don't really have much else to say here. I highly recommend that you check out the review of this book, especially if you're interested in reading it, or if you enjoy the movie at least and haven't read the book yet. I'll have a review of this coming out in just a few weeks. So now that we've covered American Psycho, let's talk about The Haunting of Hill House, which is a book that I won't actually be doing an individual review of, because if I ever cover this in a review, it'll be on Count the Classics, which we'll see when I'm able to get back to doing those, actually. I don't think there's actually an official year that Haunting of Hill House takes place, but it was published in the late 50s, and I'll tell you what, it certainly feels like it. Obviously, to me, that's not a dig at all at the book. It's not like a criticism of the book. I have read a few books from several decades ago that felt modern despite their age. This was one of them, or at least it felt modern to me, I think, because of certain things that I've experienced. It feels very authentically mid-century in terms of the tone, character actions, the dialogue between the characters, and even a lot of the imagery that it evoked in me. part of it could just be a me thing, but I thought it was super fun. And a lot of this, I think, comes from just the fact that I experienced a lot of Abbott and Costello, which is a show that ran from 19, or a comedy show that ran between like 1940 to like the mid 50s or something like that, somewhere in that approximate era. So the fact that this book just feels so authentically like that time period to me is probably no surprise just because of that show. I think that was just kind of a subconscious factor that affected how I read the book. And honestly, I'm really glad that it did because I really enjoyed what I read and the type of feelings that it evoked, the tone that it was going for, and just, the style of it. What caught me by surprise with The Haunting of Hill House is that it takes approximately half of the runtime, so to speak, for anything actually spooky or scary to happen. Everything before that is more build up and back and forth between certain characters that kind of sell the tone of the book. I thought that that was all really well done, and I can also see some people disliking the type of horror or spookiness that The Haunting of Hill House is going for, but I will say that it really worked for me. The spooky moments were genuinely spooky to me just because of the way that they were the way that they were written about. I think Jackson's prose is actually surprisingly good, but the only thing that I dislike about the book, to be like actively dislike about the book, is just the fact that Eleanor as the main character has like very frequently goes into like bouts of internal dialogue, like talking to herself in the first person, whereas the rest of the book is third person. And at least my copy of the book doesn't have any, denotation to what the actual in Eleanor's head's thoughts are. So sometimes it can be a little bit confusing going back and forth trying to figure out, you know, like just kind of a whiplash type of thing where you'll read a sentence and be like, oh, wait, that was Eleanor thinking something rather than just the narrator saying whatever was going on. Like, it's hard to explain, but that was the only thing that I disliked about the book, that was that Eleanor's thoughts were not denoted properly for my taste. Oh, and one more thing that I almost forgot to mention. I think that the ending of The Haunting of Hill House was rather great. I think even amongst the people who didn't like the book overall, or didn't love the book at least, thought that the ending was rather fitting. And I would say that I agree with that. It was rather abrupt, leaves a lot of questions for the reader to ponder about, but I thought that it was rather thought provoking and fitting for the story as well. And now that we've covered that, let's talk about the final book for my spooky season wrap up, being Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And I will go ahead and say this up front with this book. I feel slightly cheated having thought about this book as a spooky season type book because it's not a scary book at all. It says, the unsurpassed modern masterpiece of romantic suspense. And I mean, it's even a little bit hard to agree with that because until you get to the twist about two-thirds of the way through the book, and I will say there is a twist because my knowing that was the only thing that got me through the first two-thirds of the book, the twist to the end is very suspenseful. Everything before that is like, it's really just the feeling and the tone of gothic literature, which can be really enjoyable for some, and I won't say that I actively disliked all of the beginning part of this book, but it was way too slow for me personally. The first two-thirds of the book, like 230 pages out of the 380-page runtime, they're not great. Like, it's really boring and slow. I mean, if you're into the characters or into the tone or into the style of writing, I can see you still enjoying the first two-thirds perfectly fine, but for me, they didn't really work too well. It took until a dramatic scene occurred after these first 230 pages happens. By then, I was mostly in, but for the everything before that, it was hard for me to determine whether or not I would want to go on with the book. It was still slow after this dramatic scene a little bit, but it wasn't egregious. But then the twist happened about two-thirds of the way through, and from that point all the way through to the end of the book is amazing. Easily 5 stars. Everything before that is just a little bit more mixed. So if you're somebody who, uh, if you're interested in reading the book or want to read it because it's a popular book, I would recommend giving it a shot, but just knowing that the first two-thirds of it are really slow and a little bit hard to get through, especially for more modern audiences. And I hate to say more modern audiences, especially being a person who is a Zoomer. anybody else in my generation who would try to read this book would probably quit like 40 or 50 pages in, just be like, oh, it's a boring book, whatever, and then, like throw it in the trash and forget that it ever existed. But if you're a patient reader, I recommend still giving this a shot because, like I said, from the twist all the way to the end is really great. Even if everything before, even if it takes a bit too long to get to that point, I guess. Like I said, it's not really a spooky season book, but since I was sold on it being that way, I decided I would cover it in this video anyway because I had already had plans to cover these 3 books in this video because of scheduling reasons. It's more of a mystery, I guess. I mean, even then, it's not even really a mystery, but I would say it's more of a mystery than it is a spooky season book. So it's hard to really, explain what this book actually is. But if you're interested in it, still read it because the twist to the end is great. But probably the my least favorite of these 3 books. If I were to rank my enjoyment of these 3 books, it would definitely be American Psycho first, then Haunting of Hill House, and then Rebecca, which is the order that I read them in. So didn't have a fantastic spooky season reading, but it was enjoyable enough for me. And that's the wrap up. This is the end of the video. A little bit of a different one, like I said, but I still had fun with it and wanted to be able to do it. Plus, I needed an extra video because of scheduling purpose due to things that might happen at the end of November. So thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. A little bit of a shorter one as well, so hopefully that, suits you guys a little bit better. But get ready for December because it's officially Christmas season. Not that I'll do anything to celebrate that either. I mean, I hope to be able to read some Christmas related stories, but we'll see how timing and scheduling goes with that. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be back again next week, I believe, with November's reading wrap up and TBR video, or December's reading wrap up and TBR video covering what I read in November. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. I'll see you guys in the next video.